A very good afternoon, all the participants. I welcome all of you in the second day of our one-week International Faculty Development Program, themed Accelerating Equality and Empowerment of Women in All Spheres from 8th of May to 12th May 2023. It is organized by the Department of Management and Social Sciences, Amity University in Tashkent. For the information of the House, yesterday was the first day, and we had two very esteemed speakers, Professor Vibhuti Patel, Vice President, Indian Association of Women's Studies, India, where she talked about the acceleration of equality and empowerment through feminism and foreign policy. And we had another speaker, Professor Veena Vaswani ma'am, Director, Center of Ethics, Yenapoya, deemed to be University, Bangalore, India, where she spoke about accelerating equality and empowerment through healthcare. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we have two speakers again. The first session will be conducted by Professor Indira Ramarao ma'am, formerly Professor of Sociology, University of Mysore, and the second session will be by Dr. Supriya Banerjee, Assistant Professor, Amity University in Tashkent. I may now take the honor to introduce our first speaker. Professor Indira Ramarao ma'am is an Indian sociologist. In her university career spanning 42 years, she has held such positions as Chair of the Department of Sociology, Director of the International Center, and Honorary Director of the Center of Women's Studies at the University of Mysore. Ma'am is an honorary adjunct professor at the University of Iowa. Ma'am had worked on American women and technical education on Fulbright postdoctoral scholarship at Purdue University, West Lafayette, Indiana. Ma'am is the president of Samruddhi Foundation, a civil society group that she initiated with her family and friends for building the capacities of women, research students, and members of society. Ma'am is currently heading a team that is translating Anthony Giddens' sociology into Kannada, besides being involved in translation projects and evaluation of forestry programs in Karnataka. She was secretary of the Indian Sociology Society and is currently the honorary president, Alumni Association, Department of Society, Masan Gangotri, University of Mysore, Mysuru. Ma'am, we welcome you, and it is our honor to have you here.
Thank you, and namaste to all our participant friends. I will speak for about, I hope, 40 to 45 minutes. I have, divided my talk into a couple of categories, and then I'll be very happy to engage in an interaction with all of you. And I'm not using any PPT because I like, as I said before we started, talking. And so I'd like to begin by raising very fundamental questions about four concepts. You see, the topic for today's lecture is accelerating equality and empowerment through education. So there are actually three concepts here in the title itself. One is equality, the second is empowerment, and the third is education. I have added one more, which I call as equity, because ultimately, if equality has to be accelerated, it has to translate to equity. So I believe that we have to have a conceptual clarity about these four very important and very critical concepts that I would be talking about and, obviously referring to in my presentation. So let's start by talking about what is equality. I know you have already had two very good presentations yesterday, and I'm sure that the concept would have come up for discussion. But then we are always looking at equality as if it is both the means and the end. But what I have learned is that equality is only the beginning of a long journey, the conferment of equality to all groups in our society. Basically, what is equal? What does being equal mean? Who is unequal? Now, if you take the case of India itself, see, in 1950 itself, we became a democratic republic and gave ourselves a constitution. And the Constitution of India, the preamble begins by saying, "We the people of India." Now, the term "we the people," always gives a sense of thrill to me, because that indicates the diversity in this country's population. It also conveys a message that in this society, we do not have a monoculture like population. You have different groups that are multicultural, multi-religious, multi-caste, multilingual, and spread over different regions. Now, the constitution of this country took into account all those diversities and decided that we have to give ourselves the constitutional mandate of equality. So basically, equality means crossing barriers where all people, irrespective of gender, irrespective of race, irrespective of ethnicity, irrespective of caste, irrespective of whatever your linguistic identities are, irrespective of class in the first place, are all given equal opportunity. Basically, equality means equal opportunity. Equal opportunity for what? As a sociologist, for me, equality lies in giving every human being, wherever that person may be located, an opportunity, a channel, a path to achieve, whatever dreams that person has. I like using the word dream because I do not think that any social change, any social transformation, or any, desire for equality can be, achieved if you don't dream. Dream of what? I'm not talking of personal dreams, but I'm talking of dream for creating a better society where gaps between different groups, based, as I had already said, on gender and many other issues, are, closing. So basically, equality is about access. And it begins with provision of access. We have come, if you look at the history of many of our societies, we began with a narrative of inequality, where only few people had opportunities to get education, because we're talking about education today. They had opportunities to get access to knowledge. Only they could go to schools. They could beat ignorance, as a result of which they got opportunities for what we sociologists call social mobility. Because we are all the time, most of the people desire social mobility, and we want upward mobility. So if you have to achieve that dream of upward mobility in your life, you need to have access to equal opportunities. So basically, the first concept that we have used here in today's theme is equality. I'll come to accelerating later. Equality meaning provision of equal opportunities to all people. We are not talking about biological, physical differences. Everything is going beyond the differences that we find in our society, and allow people to do what they want. Of course, within the framework of a legally approved system that is, created to achieve social good, as I call it. So equality is equal access, basically. And before I go to the next concept, I just would like to briefly touch upon what I meant by equality and what I mean by equality. It is access. There are plenty of opportunities in our society, but that is not enough. Creation of opportunities, creation of facilities, creation of avenues is one thing. But the next and perhaps the most important stage is to provide access. But so this is equality, equal opportunity for all people, removal of barriers, and creating a social system where you go beyond the differences. And also, more importantly to me, respect those differences. You see, being equal and being same are not the same. Let me make what I have in my mind very clear. Many people often confuse being equal with being same, doing the same. No, we have every right for our diversity. I have every right as a human being to retain my identity. I also look at equality as identity. Especially we are talking in the context of empowerment, gender, women. We look at in the context of, you see, freedom of, I'll come to choice later when I talk of empowerment. But right now, equality also, you see, is to be understood as respect for difference. I may, have certain features which are determined by my identities. So whenever we create a situation where our identities do not block equal opportunities or equal access, that is equality for me. It is one thing that we all cannot look the same, be the same, do the same. And equality doesn't definitely mean that we are all doing the same things. It's basically a situation of freedom where we use that equal opportunity to achieve the desired goals. Now, moving further, the second concept which I included was, I said, equity. What is the difference between equality and equity? Because you cannot discuss accelerating equality or empowerment through education without talking about equity. So what is equity? In fact, for me, equity is more important than equality, because equality is given. Yes, it's a right that is conferred on us. But translating equality into equity is what is actually required. We often make a mistake and think that, okay, everybody is equal, if you are not able to use those opportunities, then it's your problem. And there are people who argue that there is no inequality. There are people who want to say that, well, it is in your mind. You are creating it. In fact, often sociologists are being told, it is in your mind. You people talk so much about inequality. It's not there. Where is it? You have laws, you have, so many of these opportunities that are open. So if you are not using it, or if somebody is not using it, it's because of that person's capacity or incapacity, whatever you want to call it. So I'm very particular about this word equity, because I know that all of us, I'm sure, at some point of time realize that mere provision of equal opportunities doesn't ensure the equal utilization of those opportunities. See, that's what I said, when equality is translated into action. If we have to look at a standardized definition for equity, it is a situation where equality is translated into action. Yes, I have the right to educate myself, my children, my people of my neighborhood. The right is there for everybody. But why is it that you are still talking of illiteracy? Why is it you are still talking of gender gaps in educational access? Why is it that we are still talking of gaps in accessing opportunities for good education? Why is it that we ourselves are talking about, institutions that are excellent, institutions that are not excellent, institutions with so much funding, institutions without any funding? It always bothers me, when I talk about a little about this when we go to education. So the next stage of equality, if it has to accelerate, if it has to speed up, then what we require is to create a society where there is equity. What is equity? Basically, equity is a situation or a condition. I use that word. Equity is a condition where we are allowed, or we have the facility, we have the provision to translate that equality into action. Because equality, as the messages come up, it's an ideal. Yes, you do need to have ideals. The ideal is that everybody should have equal access. But it doesn't stop with that. It doesn't stop. You need to reach a situation where there is equality in what I call the utilization of equal opportunities. That is translating equality into equity. Like, a sociologist once said that the race for equality is not run among equals. It is actually always being run among people who are not equal. Because for various reasons, you know that this is an unequal society. We live in an unequal world. So as long as we don't create to accelerate equality, to make equality, which is a kind of a, it's a broader concept. I always look at equality as a framework within which we have to start working and looking for breaking those barriers that have been created among different people for different reasons. So equity is a situation where, I am entitled. There is a word called entitlement, which means that my right is not simply something that is there on paper. It is not something that is just given to me. I must be able to make that right, translate it into action. It is achievable. We keep using that word quite often. When equality is achievable, it becomes an entitlement. It becomes it becomes equity. Of course, the right is there. But the gap between the conferment of the right, which is equality, and the actual realization of that right, which is equity, needs to be bridged if we have to accelerate equality. And now we go to the third issue of empowerment, which is part of the title of the talk today. Excuse me, I've been getting these messages are coming up here, and I think we will talk about it, because could you please wait, or maybe put it up in the box, or okay, if it's a question you have in your mind, fine, just I will answer everything. Okay,
and we will take up the questions at the end. We have already
at the end, because now sometimes the thought
I'll read out the questions to you, ma'am.
Yeah. Let okay, questions are most welcome. Okay, so all those questions that have come up will be there, in the box.
Yes, ma'am, it will be there. I'll read out to you at the end,
so that nothing will go unanswered. Okay,
right, ma'am. Yes.
So next we move to empowerment. Now, since 2000, this is a concept which we have been using very, very liberally. You talk of empowerment, especially in the context of women. But I would say that every human being has to have a sense of empowerment, has to feel a sense of empowerment. Now, what is this empowerment? Empowerment basically is the freedom of choice. Not many people use this word in that context at all. See, when you talk of empowerment, you say, okay, there is this scheme, there is this law, there is this provision, so many programs are there, and what is the problem? Especially we were asked this question about women. But then, who is an empowered woman? I'm not undermining the importance of government programs or state programs or all those, committees that are being set up things that have been, all the programs that are being taken up from time to time. However, I would like to say that an empowered person is a person who has the freedom to make choices in his or her or in his or her life. So a person must have the freedom to decide what that person wants to do with two things, especially when you're looking at it in the context of gender. I would always say that women need to make two decisions. So what they need to do is, first, as a woman, I must have the freedom to take decisions relating to my body, because all of us know, we'll talk a little more about it later. The body is the site of inequality. The body is the site of struggle for a female. The body is the site of oppression for many. So I must have, as a woman, as a person, the freedom to make choices relating to my body. And both men and women, it's not just women, both men and women must have the freedom to decide what they want to do with their life. So when you talk of empowerment, we look at empowerment as a situation where, the individual has the freedom to make choices relating to their lives. That is empowerment, according to me. That is the true meaning of empowerment. It is not, just to be measured. It doesn't just have to be measured in terms of quantitative factors. It is to be understood. I won't even use the word measure. It is to be understood in the context of the freedom that a person has to make choices. That freedom that, members of a society have to make choices relating to their lives. So now we go to the other concept of education, because that's what I'm supposed to be talking about mostly, because you also have different themes in the course of the program. So I'll concentrate after this, the next part of my talk, on education. Now, basically, what is education? Now, education is a term that is often used in a very loose context. We kind of divide, the society into two broad categories and say educated and uneducated. But yes, just as formal education is important, it's perhaps, according to me, most important as a tool of social mobility. However, education is not confined just to acquisition of formal degrees. It is to be seen as something beyond that. So when you're talking of accelerating equality or empowerment through education, it cannot be just limited to getting degrees. Because let us now relate the word education to empowerment itself. As a quick example, to say what I understand by education, or what we should understand by the term education. See, if there is a person who may have very high academic qualifications, but yet does not have the freedom to make choices about that person's life, then where is the empowerment? Where is equality? Where is equity? So education, I will, as I progress further, we'll discuss with you a few conditions that must be created by education if it is to create an empowered and equal society. Because we have to use these three concepts: equality, empowerment, education. Always they should go hand in hand. They are correlated to each other. Within quotes, I said it is something which is beyond just formal qualifications. While they are, I would consider extremely important, education also means acquisition of certain qualities, acquisition of certain assets, acquisition of certain mindsets, acquisition of, in a larger context, the freedom to make choices. See, that is where it gets related to empowerment. Education must confer on us the freedom to make choices, to identify our life's paths. So all these four concepts that I have used in the first part of my presentation: one, equality, which is basically a context. It is a frame, it is an ideal, it is a dream, it is a goal, it's a reality. It's not just a concept, it is a practice. When does equality become a practice? When there is equity. Equity is when equality becomes a practice. Now, third thing, what is empowerment? How, when there is equity, automatically empowerment comes, because when the equality given to me is translated into action, when I decide what I want to do with my life, when I decide, women, they say, when does a woman, a female, a girl become empowered? When she decides what she wants to do with her life. It's not somebody taking decisions for me. It's not that somebody will decide, how I do, what I do, how I dress, how I speak, whether I go for this course or not, or whether I take up my job even after, studying for 15 years or 16 years, as the case may be, or, impose those gender stereotypes on me. That is not empowerment. That is not education. So that empowerment is a choice. And the fourth term, education, which we have used, means it is an overall power which an individual gets, not only to come out of the trap of ignorance, but also to acquire certain other qualities which makes life better for that person, and also for the society, and also for the groups with which initially that person may be associated. So now I think my talk will focus exclusively on education in relation to equality, equity, and empowerment, because that's the theme on which I'm supposed to be focusing. Now coming to what does education do? Now let's move on to the other question. How do you accelerate equality or equity through education? How do you create an empowered group through education? How do you translate the visions of the constitutions, the visions of the law of all societies into action? And we look at education. Sociologists have called education the greatest leveler. They have used the word leveler. See, because we don't live on a level ground. This society is not a level ground. Since we live in an unequal world, we try our best to level that unequal ground. And what better strategy what better strategy is available to us than education? Because you see, by education is the one tool that has all the, what should I say, all the capacity, the strength to remove those barriers for creating a level playing field, as it is called, because society is not a level playing field. Otherwise, you see, for example, in theory, we are all equal. In theory, there is equality. That is what here, one of the comments that came was equality is an ideal. Yes, in theory, yes, we are all equal. Nobody prevents us from going anywhere seeking equal opportunities. But why then do you still have people who don't have access to education. Why, you see, even forget about higher levels of education, as you call. Even today, there are a large number of girls, especially, who are out of school. In India, we had, the constitution said compulsory primary free education. But even with that, which has a history of more than half a century, why is it that you still have girls out of school? Why is it that you have children from poor families in many parts of the world not being able to go to school? So this is where, questions have to be raised about education as a fundamental right, which we got only very recently. So by merely creating new pathways, by merely creating new laws, I don't think, you can remedy the situation. What I am looking for is create a situation where, you see, the minimum requirements for leading a life that takes us forward are created. See, I'm sure all of you may be aware of this. When, the World Women's Conference was held at Beijing in 1995, women from across the world, globe, participated in this. When the question of deciding on an agenda for future programs came, when the discussions started happening, the members, the representatives of different countries came up with different action plans. But a large number of women who came from emerging economies, as they're called today, from societies where many were still facing basic deprivation, they said, what we want, what is it that we are looking for when we say we want an empowered life? We first want all our children to be in primary school. And one of the responses was, people asked, oh, primary school, why are you asking for a primary school? They said, we want a primary school. We want access to continuous supply of drinking water. We want access to safe, clean energy sources. Because if, you're talking of women's empowerment, if you're talking of creating an equal world for women, see, create conditions where women have the freedom to seek knowledge. If, there are people who are spending their entire day sitting in the kitchen, cooking, cleaning, carrying head loads, fetching water, getting fuel and fodder, where is the time to go to school? So, you see, today, when I was a student, I remember we were taught that the three basic necessities of life are food, clothing, shelter. Education was not there. And nobody asked questions like, what kind of food? What kind of shelter? What kind of clothing? We just did this. But today, all of us, I'm sure we are all aware of the fact that we have traversed a long way when we have started asking basic questions. What kind of food? It need not be a 20-30 course meal, but clean, nutritious, healthy food. Clothing that will keep us warm in winter and comfortable in summer. And shelter, not 3-floor, 4-floor houses. That's not, possible for everybody, but a shelter where there is security, safety. And we have added many more. The SDGs are themselves an example. We keep on adding, and we keep on changing our goals. So today, education is no longer a luxury. Education it's a basic necessity. And it's also heartening that in many parts of the world, the number of girls going to school has risen in terms of sheer numbers. But education, first point that I want to make is if it has to create an equal empowered society, just does not mean that more numbers get access. I'm really, really happy that in India itself, for example, the number of girls going to higher levels of education has enormously increased in the last 1 decade. Of course, COVID gave a very serious blow to that. But however, if you look at the statistics on education, you will see that because the truth was that as girls go from a lower level to a higher level, their numbers would go on decreasing. But if you look at all the educational statistics today, you will see that in higher education, in school education, and at all levels, you find that there has been a really good increase in the number of girls, something to be really happy. And whenever results are announced, whenever distinctions are announced, you see that there is a long list of girls. Just yesterday, the results of the high school final grade have been announced in my state. And I see that most of the toppers, as they call them, are girl students. But while I'm happy about that, I would like to look beyond. We are all the time talking about STEM jobs. So first, when you look at education, equality, empowerment, it's like, it's a threefold relationship is there. Education, yes. In terms of removal of barriers to go to school is first thing. Providing access near our homes. At least for primary education, the target that within 3 kilometers or 4 kilometers distance, there should be a primary school is almost achieved here. And another truth about education and empowerment, especially vis-a-vis girls and women, is that, see, as long as women, young girls stay in school, they are saved of early marriage, which is not something typical of one society, but across the world, there are societies where early marriage, is still an issue to grapple with for girls. So education, on the one hand, is access to knowledge, removing the circle of ignorance that haunts us. But on the other, it also gives a sense of self-confidence. And it, to me, what is most important is education can empower us, can build an empowered society only when it creates social networks. One of the damages that COVID did was it broke the social networks which schools, and colleges and educational institutions were providing, especially to those who did not have access to digital sources of knowledge. Because for girls, you see, if you look at the history of education itself, there you will find attempts that the patriarchal world made to deprive women of access to education, keep them, saddled with the domestic responsibilities, not allowing them to seek knowledge because they never wanted women to be informed. See, to create an informed group, men or women, you need to create networks. Unless they go out, unless they meet people, unless they see what's happening around, they will not be able to think of how unequal this world is, of what they are deprived of. They will not ask questions. And the tradition of deprivation of education to girls and to people of many castes in the rigid caste structure here in this society was because, those in the advantaged comfort zones did not want them to get education because they didn't want them to ask questions. So education is important for two reasons: to create equal, empowered societies. One is it teaches us to question. It also teaches us to protest when there is what you call social injustice. So one thing, it opens up sources of knowledge quickly. It opens up opportunities for developing self-confidence, and it brings, women especially, and everybody for that matter, out of the sense of shame that illiteracy, ignorance causes. Because you see, one of the primary reasons for oppression of any group, is when you see they say, I don't know. You see that for creating why education is important. It brings us out of three traps. I see. My teacher taught me this. She said, you are not supposed to say three things. One is, don't say I don't know. Don't say that. You can know. Second, she said, don't say I cannot do. You have to do. And the third thing, never say I'm scared. So get out of this, trap of I don't know, I cannot do, I am scared. And then you will see the world opening up. And I think for girls and women, this is really important. And the other point moving ahead is, why is education required for empowerment? Because education, you see, promotes collective action. As I have said, I already have said it when I said education creates the social networks. So social networks in turn create the space for what we call collective action, which is required, especially for marginalized groups, to create an equal society. Unless, we open up the space to bring leadership from the ranks, you see, of all groups, from what I call as the grassroots. Where is the scope for leadership to emerge? Leadership generally comes from top to bottom. But now we need, through education, to create leadership. Not that it has not been done or not being done, but education, in any discussion on education, empowerment, equality, equity, gender, class, caste, ethnicity, etc., we need to say that the leadership of movements, because education itself is a movement, the leadership of movements has to be created from the grassroots. So education also creates a condition for that to happen. And now the other thing is, I have already made a reference to this. I think that education is something that gives us the freedom, as I said, empowered person, to make decisions relating to one's body. When any discussion of gender, especially because I know there has been talk about feminist policy, health, etc., and there will be many more related themes that would be discussed in the course of your program. But the body, when you talk of women, when you talk of gender, when it is the body that has to be discussed. You can't set it aside. What you call as sexuality is definitely an issue that needs to be brought in when we talk of education and empowerment, education equality. The female body, as I said, has either been the site of oppression or glorification. I wanted to say this at the end, but now that the talk, I am on that, I'll just say that so that we don't repeat. So it is either glorified as the site of preserving, one's culture. This is done in so many societies. So there is a kind of an aura that surrounds the female body. And many times the fears that are created around the female body are perpetuated by the patriarchal value system, practices, and those mindsets. So in order to come out of that, you need education, because only reading, discussion, exposure, they kind of break those myths that surround the female body. Or it's either glorified or it is abused. So to get to, to acquire the freedom of opposing both the glorification and abuse of this female sexuality, which is one of the most serious impediments, according to me, for empowerment in this society. We need education. Education, not just in terms of degrees, but education that puts real knowledge into our minds, education that breaks myths. So in that sense, education becomes very important. Now, quickly giving some data, which was recently presented in a UN conference about why it is necessary, why education is important, in spite of the feeling that equal opportunities are there. Why is it important? It says, I'm quoting, 67.5% of young people in the age group 15 to 24 who are not in employment, who are not in education, who are not in any kind of training are women. And women also account for 63% of all illiterate adults. And with digital illiteracy, as I call it, this number might increase. See, very easily people say, who doesn't have a mobile phone today? Yes, everybody has a mobile. But during the pandemic-driven closure of schools, educational institutions, and all knowledge sources to a large number of people, it was realized that, not everybody has access to that kind of digital technology, which helps them to learn. Because education, as I look at it, is not just about learning, it's also about unlearning. So to understand certain truths, to test what we think is true in the light of the reality, you need access to knowledge, and the digital medium is definitely a very good source. So, but however, along with illiteracy induced by not going to school, digital illiteracy is a threat which has emerged already and continues to affect many people. And the other thing is, so what is it that we have to talk about? That it's still not a universal asset. Universal access to education is not there, especially for many young women and girls. And lastly, women who could make decisions. This is a global phenomenon, are hardly in about 30% of leadership positions. So access to education, control over resources, or the entry into positions of power that help them make decisions that can change the lives of other women are not there for a large number of women. So that is why here the inequality in society continues, and we need education to empower, to bring more and more women into a system where change makers can be created. So the only other 2-3 points I would make and stop for us to create the space for interaction is, see, in spite of the increase that we are seeing, I have already referred to this, in sheer number of girl students at different levels of education, gender stereotypes as expressed by familial responsibilities, early marriage, sacrificing chances for upward social mobility due to emotional insecurity that is created by not allowing them, to take up employment opportunities, etc. inequality based on gender continues. So ultimately, what are we looking for? When you talk of education as an equalizer, as I call it, what are you looking for when you look at education as a channel for empowering, that is, increasing the number of people who have control over their lives? Ultimately, education has meaning only when it, I think, helps us to take control over our lives, and not just because of our gender, because of class, because of other social hierarchies that are found in our society. We are pushed to the margins, and the center is always occupied by people who determine what others have to do or what others cannot do. So education basically has to transform attitudes. What attitudes? Gender prejudices, gender biased mindsets, gender biased policies, gender biased action. And as I have already repeated, allow women, create conditions when women can decide what they want to do and what they do not want to do. Gender stereotype is not just about telling women what they should do, but it's also about telling them what they're not supposed to do. And as I said, the freedom from living in a world where there is violence. And violence, education, you see, also should equip all marginalized groups to come out of the situation of violence, which they face in different forms and different degrees. Much as, you may say there is violence has now come into the public domain. And there has been so much thinking, writing, discussion, action on violence. 20 years, 30 years ago, we didn't hear much discussion about gender and health. People didn't understand then when health was being discussed from a feminist point of view. People are, why do you want to do that? But today, you see, violence of various forms has come into the public domain. But it is time we have the freedom to counter violence right from the family, which need not necessarily be expressed in terms of physical violence all the time, but it can also be deprivation of our rights. So before closing, I just would like to, quickly say, so what did I mean in my talk? I brought up certain issues, I brought up certain concepts. So putting it all together, what is it that I'm trying to say? First, I started by looking at these four concepts: equality, equity, education, empowerment, which I feel are all interrelated, because nothing relating to any group must be discussed in isolation. Today there is so much talk going on about the intersectionality angle in researchers and studies on different social groups. Not that we are unaware of it. I'm sure many of us have talked about it, discussed about it. What is this intersectionality? The intersectionality angle comes when you don't look at the problem of any vulnerable group, of any group for that matter, only in a monodirection approach. There are so many interrelated issues. And so when we are talking of creating an empowered society, when you are talking of creating an equal world, we must first decide, what does equality mean to different groups? Why we have no argument about the basic tenets of equality. But we have to go beyond and say, what are those conditions that are created in society that are promoting this equality? See, whenever we talk of power, underrepresentation of women, we always blame, we say patriarchy. I was recently writing in the context of the elections that are going to happen in my state tomorrow. You see that women are not even 7% of the candidates who are contesting. So I raised the question, is it patriarchy? There is no doubt that patriarchy has its part, but it's time to go beyond and look at the conditions created in society, in families, in neighborhoods, in schools, in workplaces, and see why women are not coming forward to get into those leadership positions. Why are they being prevented? Why is it that the political system is using their services as promoters, as campaigners, but they're not allowing them. So what do we do is the next issue. Not just play a blame game and criticize and stop at that. So that's why this intersectionality approach definitely is a good pathway for us to break those barriers and see why this situation exists. And education, of course, I think our whole way of looking at education must change. While we accept and agree that formal education is a great source of strength, yes, it should be there, because it brings them out of that cycle of ignorance, the vicious circle of ignorance, poverty, suppression, everything. But it is to be seen beyond just formal qualification. So I end by saying that none of these concepts, equality, equity, empowerment, education, can be looked in isolation from each other. And different, we need more micro studies, because I know there are many of our young colleagues here and faculty members, students, including all of us. I now have begun to, not that it's something very new, but I think we should do more micro studies and come up with realistic solutions to what groups, what regions require what type of empowering measures, instead of doing everything from a macro level and coming with top-down solutions. So I'll just stop here. Thank you for this opportunity, and I'll be very happy to respond to any questions, clarifications, comments.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was wonderful listening to you. It was a treat to our ears. Especially some of the things that I really liked is when you talked about the equality and equity, and a very different but very pre-existing thing that we had was that equality doesn't mean being same. Equality also means that we can show off our diversity. We can also be diverse in different kinds. um, at the end of your speech, you talked about the leadership of women and how women can change the society. As a sociologist, I would like you to explain a little bit more about how women as leaders would change the society, and does it really make an impact of the decision that is being made by the people or the committee that is only male, or there are some females also in that committee? How does it change?
Yeah, thank you for this question. Shall I answer or take all the questions together? I'll respond to this. Yes, this is definitely a very critical question that you have raised. When the talk of reservation for women began, this question was asked. See, parliaments have been there, assemblies have been there, local governments have been there. Why are you stressing on this? You see, even the women's movement was initially not for this, because I came into women's studies academia from the movement. So I can, say something about this. We don't want this special treatment, we will fight and get it. And what difference would it make was a question that was frequently asked. But over a period of time, we have realized a few things. The truth being, what is open is not really open. See, what I'm trying to say is, I'll give you a quick example. There is a seat. You, as a woman, that's why I said that is equality. There is equality, so I can contest. Okay, nobody has prevented me from contesting for that position. But there are people who will see that I would not. And that is why I talked about the female body, which is the site of oppression. And also, you see, what as I said, when more women enter the political space, it will mean that there is going to be redistribution of power. See, people have, even patriarchy is about that only. No, people have enjoyed power. I'm not saying we'll make it a man versus woman issue, but whatever the category may be, whether that category is caste, whether it is gender, whether it is ethnicity, whether it is region, whether it is class, some small groups have always enjoyed at the cost of the larger number. But when you are going to turn the table, when you are going to turn that situation, because I remember I met a very senior member of the parliament once, who had already contested some 6-7 times. And that was the time this talk was going on. But even today, we have not been able to give. But India has definitely given 50%, that. So he asked me, I don't know why you, he was talking to me. And then he said, I don't know why you people come and make so much noise here. If so many of you, he said, he included, if so many of you get inside, there will be 181 women in the parliament. What happens to me, my power, my seat, if my constituency gets reserved? See, that is what I said, the fear of losing power. So that is one thing. So if there is reservation, yeah, I agree that many will not make the difference. But I think that the history of marginalization is hundreds and hundreds of years old. But the history of the struggle for equality is only a few decades old. When the reservation for women in local self-government started, nobody spoke. Everywhere there was that comment, these people, I don't know why they have been brought. But changes have been there. And because if you say, okay, this chair is empty, you can sit. The society creates conditions. That is what I said, there is equality, but no equity, where women will not go and sit there. They will say, okay, who prevents you from contesting? Go ahead. But then, what happens? And to your other question that you raised about, will they make a difference? I think, I'm not saying at all that all men are gender insensitive. There are gender sensitive men. However, there are certain issues that touch the lives of women. Alcoholism, induced violence, and creation of certain basic conditions. For example, you see, when the women's movement demanded that the mother's name be included in school, in our own state, this has happened. This was more than 2.5 decades ago. Everybody laughed. They said, you people are always here to create trouble, okay? Why are you asking this? Then we said it is important to have identity, because the mother is nowhere there in the scene. Many times, it so happened that they were isolated and she couldn't prove, especially those days when there were no certificates or digital documentation, etc. But now they have made it mandatory, and you find all school forms doing it. Why is it important? Because it affects questions of inheritance, questions of identity, etc. So when women, when they want, they can make a difference, because many issues that have otherwise been sidelined because they were thought to be unimportant have been brought up by women. But you are very right. Often it has so happened that the few women who get in are also, what should I say, appropriated, and they don't speak up. However, I think that the process is just few decades old, and I have hopes that if it comes, but it's already come in panchayats and urban bodies here, it will make a difference. I hope I have answered your question. And there was this first, when I started, one of the things that came up was, what is the, please correct me if I'm wrong, is there a common definition for respect? One of our friends here asked that question. Yes, rather than definition, see, I think that respect is allowing people, what is respect? Allowing people to be what they are. Not fixing, especially after globalization, certain types of behavior, certain types of dressing, certain types of talking came to be projected as the right ones. And those who don't fall into that category were made to feel bad. So I would say that respect a person for what that person is. Maybe biological identity, social identity, cultural identity, and class identities, etc. To me, respect means creating a world where everybody has the space to live life the way they want. That is where I look at it. There was one more question on equality.
Madam, I have a small question.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, you talked about education. Actually,
Yeah.
you gave a new perspective to education by saying that education that breaks sexuality, that which either glorifies or abuses the women body, and that we should come out of it. How do we ensure that? Yes, we always see that instead of, there is on one hand, people are either glorifying women or they are trying to abuse women. So if education is to be a great leveler, how do we ensure that yes, we instill values in them and make the society at large to look beyond this sexuality totally, that we are as humans equally? How do we ensure that, ma'am?
See, for this, I mean, to fix a common standard answer for that, we'll have to think twice. But surely I will say that. I will say how. Education, as I said, is not, one is you acquire knowledge. The other is, you see, you live in a certain way and show that that is how life should be about. Because what we now lack, according to me, this is my feeling, we don't have many role models. The young also, especially, there is so much talk going on. They don't have too many role models. And I think value, for example, is again a very sensitive word, right? Because we cannot fix certain standards about the right value, the wrong value. But what I told you was that when you respect diversity, respect difference, and when you place social good above individual good all the time, then, a better situation can be created. Now, coming to your question about how to get people out of this mindset, as well as a practice, that the female sexuality, the female body is used either for glorification, because what? Sorry. Okay, I'll answer this. This is just 2 days ago, somebody asked me this question. Either glorified. See, women, you come to think of it, have always been used to, they create the impression and make to women internalize the value that it is their responsibility to protect the culture. To, the notions of purity and pollution, if you look at it, are always imposed on women. And all those restrictions, vis-a-vis behavior, vis-a-vis intermingling in the world outside, are put on women. So the one way is, you see, I will tell you, let's not always just keep going backwards. But now that the responsibility, we have to change, and we have to change others to think positively about the female body. It is that realize there are certain truths about the female body, the male body, and tell people about this. Tell them the truth. And wherever caution is required, caution them. Like, for example, a simple thing like there are even today very few schools, like in near my house here, there is a school where they teach young children what they call good touch and bad touch. And many people say, what is this that not getting them to do tests, get ranks, etc. That's not the only thing, as I'm going on saying. It is important to demystify the body. Yes, there are truths. These are realities, which they must be told, which all of us must realize. And we should know how not to let this body scare us or allow others to scare us. So I will definitely say, if there are 100 persons, all the 100 will change once only. But we should create situations where we talk about this issue of sexuality, tell both boys and girls from a very young age, and tell them realities, tell them to be cautious where it is necessary, but not to be overburdened by that. I see Vibhuti is there. Hello, Vibhuti. What? Be very happy if Vibhuti reacts to this.
I think most important thing is that first of all, we need to be conscious about our own rights and our own self-perception. Yeah. If we allow and play in the same game of objectifying oneself, then we can't. So it begins with us. And then I think we also need to demand the same kind of behavior from others. So any time of any funny jokes or PJs or bad, this thing is made, we have to stick out our neck and say that this is not funny. That is one thing. So we have to be very, very, and also we also need to work at a larger level, write about it, speak about it.
Yes.
Also get the legislation, the way now we have this legislation of prevention of sexual harassment at workplace, where the definition is clearly, it is a remark, any sexually colored remark or things which make you uncomfortable, all that comes under the purview of that act. So it is not the intention of the accused, but it is the way the victim feels about it, no? So this is how the law, and that's a lot of debate and discussion has gone into wording this thing, because you know that the Vishaka Directive was written by the feminist activists who had themselves handled so many cases of sexual harassment and who had also faced so many kind of this objectification. So I think it's very important. Other important thing in communication and media institutes of all the colleges, I think we need to include gender issues, the way Ladli has been doing this thing, no? Whether it's advertisement or films or documentaries or any kind of communication that is made, which is of a sexist, which is stereotypical, which objectifies women or treats them as a piece of cake. I think we need to protest, and we need to bring the alternatives. And that's why I think we have given equal weightage to creation of an alternative media. So existing media which sees women as an object, and what alternate where you see women as women's agency, and what type of agency, because cabaret dancer also is portrayed as a given space in the media, but they are given space as a sex object or a seductress, not as a person who are contributing to the society, contributing to the economy. So I think women's agency as a subject, as a dignified and citizens with all their entitlements, that image, I think we as educationists can play a very, very important role, because most of the studies, even of the adolescent boys who have been caught for very sexual violence and all, when you go to prison and talk to them, they describe to you under what circumstances they grew up, no? The constant messages which they were getting all around. And there was no such investment. They say, ma'am, you have come very late in my life after all the damage is done. So I think the suggestion of National Education Policy 2020 that we should start gender sensitization and projection, positive image of girls and women, at the very early age. I think Freud is right when he says that whatever you internalize in first 6 years of your life remains with you throughout. So WDC and gender sensitization at a college level, much damage is already done. So I think we have to begin very early, very early.
Alright.
There
Thank
was
you.
one question on sari, it came up.
Yeah,
What is that?
yeah, it is there in the chat box. That
Okay.
Do you want me to read it to you, ma'am?
Yeah, please.
Dr. Seema Rizvi has asked that why is wearing sari mandatory in teaching profession, though it is uncomfortable, revealing, and does not add to teaching efficiency in any manner, whereas dresses for males are always comfortable. Are there any legal provisions to get rid of this practice?
It's not mandatory everywhere, but yes, you are right. Governments do try to send circulars from time to time and do this. They did it once in our state, and we protested, and that circular was withdrawn. I'm also, I want to share with you here that, see how what Vibhuti was also talking about, how you see we do these things. Last year there was a case of a gang rape of a young woman student in Mysore. This happened in our city. Okay, and of course the police blamed that girl for going out with a boy at that time, all that. But to our utter shock, the university issued a circular, that after 6 o'clock, girls should not go out on their own, and if at all they go in our own university campus, they should have always a male accompanying them. There's a huge anger, an expression of anger, and then the university withdrew. That all. Look at that psychology, that you can't go alone, you have to be accompanied by a man. And they simply say, why can't a system create facilities for making campuses secure? But they don't do that. But this sari thing has come, I don't know, in our state, it is not mandatory. But such circulars are issued from time to time. There is no doubt about that. But it has never been accepted. But yeah.
there are 4 more questions, no?
Hmm?
In the question box.
2 more questions.
Yeah.
One is from Miss Archana. She's asked that about the empowerment, equity, equality will be achieved through the education, as you emphasize upon. But in Indian society, we have the multiple tier of education system, which itself is the part of intersectionality. So what will be the alternative to deal the discriminatory or exclusionary form of education system, which itself is full of biases?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I think when I started talking, I said I raised this issue, but very briefly when I said, we say that education is a leveler, but within the education system itself, there are so many inequalities. I don't know if that is what you have in mind, Archana, no, has asked this question. Yeah. And
Yes, ma'am.
so you are right. Not all institutions of education, or not all categories of educational institutions are trying to, the very fact that within the system itself, there is so much inequality, I think is something that we need to talk about, because in terms of access to resources, in terms of the content of education, in terms of the location, and in terms of in various other ways, this inequality is very much inherent within the system itself. So it always bothers me, when we say, you say there are institutions of excellence, institutions with potential for excellence, state universities, central universities. There are still colleges running in one room. We had heard of single teacher, single room schools, but there are also colleges now running like that. And, you talk of state of the art infrastructure. See how, and I'm sure with, I don't know, I want Vibhuti to respond to this. With more and more private universities now coming into our country also is one case. I'm just wondering whether, there will be a clear separation between state institutions and private institutions, where those with certain advantages would go to the private. Then I am not blaming them. there are several universities and colleges which are being run without teachers, without any single permanent teacher. And so that itself is a big block, to what I may call true learning. So you are right that inequality within the system is a big hindrance to achieving many of these visions that we are trying to talk about.
Thank you,
Dr.
ma'am.
Samita Barua's question have been answered. She has asked 2 questions, no?
Yes, I can see a question by Dr. Samita Barua in the question answer box. One of the questions he has asked is, how can non-binary persons find empowerment in the field of education?
And the previous one is, why does educational institution cannot accept women's leadership?
Right.
2 questions she has asked.
No, yeah, I would extend it further and say not just educational institutions, but many institutions cannot accept women's leadership. They just cannot, because I just gave you the example. No, tomorrow the elections in our state. Out of 2,613 candidates, only 193 are women. So now you are right. Somehow either that is why, I said equality. Yes, no, there is no bar on anybody contesting for any position. I'm not just talking of politics, but even in educational institutions or in many other workspaces, subtly they try to keep women out. That is because I think, as I said, when women come into leadership positions, what I call is redistribution of power is going to happen, and they are not ready to take that. But I think we must fight. We must fight. It's not. Yeah?
Important question is about the non-binary. Students. No, yeah, but,
Why don't you say, Vibhuti?
Yeah.
I'll listen.
how can non-binary persons find empowerment in the field of education?
Yeah. We need to go beyond the gender binary to make more gender. Yeah, it's true. Now, in the first place, I think we will have to have more non-binary students coming into academic institutions first. No, then we will have a good number who will also be taking up positions. But right now, as I see, their number is very limited. Am I right, Vibhuti? Or
no, in Bombay, the problem is different. They are ready to pay fees. They want this thing.
Okay.
But colleges after colleges say that in our form, it is only he and she. There is no third column. So this is how they have been rejected. Most prestigious colleges who have got a NAC A double plus and A triple plus, they are the ones who are denying admission. So number is there because now, because of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, there are students who have cleared 12th standard. Or 10th standard at least. So, but they are seeking admission, they are not given admission. With this kind of colonial argument, which when the Parsi lady wanted admission in Bombay University, she was told that our form has only he, him, and his. We don't have any she, and she fought. And then they had to change the law. So now this is the major problem. SNDT has given admission to 18 students, but only in distance education, saying that we don't have toilets for you and we don't have hostel facility. So they for days, they can't even become a day scholar. College of Social Work, Nirmala Niketan, and this one, TISS, they have given admission, both hostel facility and admission.
In our university also, we have a student who is doing a PhD, and Mysore University has no such bank.
Yeah.
There are institutions where they have come, but in very small numbers, I think you need to create a critical mass.
They happen to be 4% of the population, but still, if you see it in terms of number, it is quite a big number. And 2 states can do it. Kerala and Tamil Nadu could do it. They completed even the census of transgender people according to their age and their requirement. Why can't other states and union territories do it? It's a question of political will.
Exactly.
There's a few more questions, ma'am. One question is from Ms. Lata Pujari. Is there any alternative for education as a medium of empowerment? Also, what would be the repression of empowerment on class and how will it impact on women and other genders?
Alternative? Now, I would only say that there is no alternative to education itself, but there is definitely scope for creating an alternate system of education which addresses these issues. For education, there is no alternative. But then again, questions of what kind of education have to be answered. I think we can slightly transform that question and put it like this. An alternate system of education which addresses all those issues we have been talking about,
Inclusive
raising, which is inclusive, which doesn't have fear, which comes out of that, what should I say, stereotypical mold is what we require.
One question is about patriarchy also, that as about patriarchy, as you emphasize. So the question is why this patriarchy suppresses women from a very long time? Why is it happening, and why can't they give equal or equality or equity to women?
They mean?
The patriarchal society.
No, I don't even think anybody can give us anything. No, it is given by the Constitution. It is our right. It is also for us to demand and take it. Yeah, patriarchy, yes, will be there. It's not just, as I told in the beginning, man versus woman or anything. It is a question of us exercising our human rights and demanding that we be given our entitlement.
With this, there was another comment that we had in the comment box that who will be giving the opportunity to the ladies up for equality? How do we get the opportunity?
Sorry?
There was one of the question that was by Ms. Noreen, I guess.
Okay, how do we get
The opportunity.
for what? For
I'm trying to check that question. I'm not able to get it. On the same line, she was asking about the opportunity and about equality about women. I think we've lost that question in between in the chat box.
Okay.
There is also a question by Kalpana Menon, no? About 33%.
There's a question on transgender now, right now.
At the last, I can see by Kalpana Menon, ma'am, what needs to be done by us citizens of the country to get the women's 33% reservation in Parliament bill passed?
That's a good question. Where is that where is that movement, Vibhuti? I want to ask you, because what should we do? I think, I don't know, I will say, I think that it is necessary to create, that's why I said pressure, must be brought. I mean, if you expect pressure to be brought only within the government to get this enacted, I don't think it will happen, because the people there are not going to ask for it. I always say that it is only in this matter that cutting across parties, people are united. Again, because it's a question of sharing power and giving up power. So I think that the civil society must act as a pressure group, and we should talk more about it, write more about it, and form groups to put pressure on the state. This is my feeling. What do you say, Vibhuti?
I think the bill was introduced 16 times because of the pressure created by women's movement. But the political parties, except for breaking of furniture in front of whole world, because everything was there on television, the whole world was watching what was happening in the parliament. And the divisive and sectarian methods which the male politicians use, no, by dividing women into caste, that it's only upper caste, upper class, katebal wali women, they will get all the power. And this is how the division was created. But once, at least in 2010, on 8th of March, all women politicians from all parties, as well as independent MPs, all of them got united and saw to it that the bill is introduced. But after introduction, it just remained with the cabinet committee. It did not get passed. And that is why among SAARC countries, like if you see Nepal or Sri Lanka or Pakistan or this thing, everywhere, like even in Afghanistan earlier, not with pre-Taliban up there, they had representation of women, mandatory quota, 15% quota.
I also always say this is what
And
they-
SAARC countries also created this pressure that what is this, you big brother? They said India is the one which doesn't have this quota, while all of the European Parliament had quota, 40% quota for women parliamentarians they created. So I think there is a global pressure is also there, but main thing is the stakes are very high. See, the same politicians who unanimously passed 33% reservation for women in local self-government bodies. Not only that, 20 years down the line, the same politicians also increased the quota from 33% to 50% in 18 states of India. Why are they ever? So that it's not a question of principle. As you said, it is a question of power sharing. And in the Legislative Assembly, Legislative Council, in the Parliament, the stakes are extremely high. So it is not only that not creating through legislative route 33% reservation as per the political science theory of critical minimum. If you want empowerment and equity and equality, critical minimum should be there so that you have agenda setting power, your voice is heard. But even at the level of giving tickets, as you said, that even for political parties, when they choose the candidates, they bypass the veterans in their own organization who have given 30, 40 years of life to their party, who have been the foot soldiers, who are the mass mobilizers, who are the agents of the political bosses in the community. They have been bypassed and not given tickets. I have been doing training of the aspirants in the political, in the election. This SP Jain Institute of Management Studies started that course for women to be in governance. And so many of these women who have been appointed by and representing all the mainstream political parties, they all were extremely disenchanted that we have been in party, we have given best years of our life and best years of our all the efforts we have made for our party, but elections after election we have been bypassed. And another thing is that glass cliff. They will give you ticket only in the constituency when they are 100% sure that they are going to lose.
Yes.
So only those tickets. So this is what have been shared by women of all political parties with this.
Okay. What should be done to change the mentality of people who are so biased? Yeah, like that's when I said building networks, talking about it, writing, discussing, bringing it to the public domain. These are the ways by which we can change, because it's of course not that no change has happened. I'm sure change has happened in quite a big way in many areas. But yes, we have to keep on talking about it. We have to keep on, including more people in these forums, discuss, and not just leave it at that, but take it where it should go. Okay.
Right, ma'am. I think more or less we have answered most of the questions from our participants. I'd like to thank you for such an intense session on equality, empowerment, and also thank Professor Vibhuti to add on her views even today. It was a really amazing session for our participants, and I'm really sure that they'll be taking something home from this session. And it is very rare that we get so many experts on women's studies and sociology together, sitting together and discussing on such a contemporary topic. Thank you.
Very, very inspiring to listen
Thank
to
you so
Professor
much, and
Indira.
thank you, Vibhuti, for coming. It's so nice to always.
Because she brings in ground level reality also, because she has been feminist activist and the public intellectual, and also very, very powerful columnist who writes both in English and Kannada. I think such rare combination.
Thank you. Learned it from you.
Thank you. We would move forward. We have another session today. The second session, or I'd say the fourth session of the 1-week International Faculty Development Program of Accelerating Equality and Empowerment of Women in All Spheres. We have the speaker now, Dr. Supriya Banerjee, Assistant Professor in Amity University in Tashkent. I'd like to—
Just for a minute, sorry for intervening. I didn't know, this suddenly came up. With your permission, may I leave? Because we have a urgent alumni meeting called, so we have to now fight for sociology. That's why.
We would love to have you, ma'am, but
yeah, me, I would love to hear. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Supriya Banerjee, She is an assistant professor at Amity University in Tashkent. She is a PhD in comparative literature from Vishwabharati University, Shantiniketan. She is the reviewer of IAFOR, University of Barcelona, Spain, and Osaka University, Japan. She has also worked with the students of Soka University, Japan, Colombo University, Sri Lanka, and Dhaka and Chittagong universities. She has also contributed in the classes of anthropology at GGC University of Georgia, USA. She has written a book entitled Devi to Superwomen, a feminist historiography. She is an awardee of a full grant by the Niti Aayog of India for the documentary based on transforming lives of women and children for rural Bengal. Her interest areas are oral histories, visual art and quiche, and gender studies. Dr.
Thank you, Dr. Shalki.
We are privileged to have you here.
Thank you, Dr. Shalki. Good afternoon, good evening. And the previous session was so, energetic. It was so engrossing that I almost forgot what I was speaking upon. So thank you, Vibhuti ma'am, and also thanks to Dr. Indira. She really raised certain grassroots issues, which really, are very pertinent in today's time. And it is very important for us to understand as women that we need to address these issues. And until these issues are addressed, feminism is not, it does not belong to the urban populace. Feminism is for everybody. It is, in India, we look at feminism as pluralistic. And this is what we have to realize, and we go forward. So today my title is based upon, I have selected a very niche area. I'm going to share my screen, and it's a very niche area where we are discussing about deconstructing the diva in contemporary visual culture. I hope it is visible, Dr. Shalki. Is my screen visible?
Not able to see it right now, ma'am. I think it will take some time.
I'm sharing my screen.
May I ask the IT support to please check?
No. Ask the IT support.
Is it visible now?
Yes,
It is.
So, but I can't see the title of my presentation. Anyways, it was deconstructing the idea of diva. And why did I select the idea of deconstruction? Deconstruction is a means and method to understand why feminism is situated at the crossroads of binary thinking in binaries. In the previous discussion, we were listening, or we were discussing about how feminism or how women are, sort of marginalized in terms of educated, non-educated, a woman who works, a woman who stays at home, or a mother and not a mother, a woman who is politically conscious or who stays at home, a woman who wears a sari or prefers to wear a business suit. So deconstruction as a method is, helps us realize that there is something which exists beside, beyond, and further than the frame which is shown to us. Why did I pick up diva as my topic today? So a diva in the contemporary culture has acquired a huge meaning, plethora of meanings. And there is a lot of connotation and denotation to the idea of diva. I will come to diva a little later. But before that, why culture? Now, culture has been defined as a method, a technique, a strategy of portraying a social, us social beings, us as social beings. However, I go back to Guru Rabindranath Tagore, and he insisted that culture means kriti. Kriti means actions. So the actions that we do in a society comprises of what we call or know as culture. The idea of diva in the contemporary culture has become very popular. It has acquired a lot of meanings. It has acquired a number of meanings, underlying meaning after meaning, and people in various fields, in a lot of fields, do not feel, embarrassed to use the word diva. Rather, they wear it as a, kind of epithet, a laurel to their names. We have found this word diva being used by the media when they address our local quote unquote divas like Priyanka Chopra or say Sushmita Sen. And we've heard Beyonce, Ariana Grande, all of them divas. So, how did this word diva come into existence, or how did it gain its popularity or gain its currency? It gained currency in the late 19th century. And the word diva means a songstress, an operatic singer, and it was attributed to women who acquired a godlike status on the screen, on the stage. So, diva basically is a Latin word which means a goddess. Interestingly, we Indian women are also standing at a locus where we are either, segregated or divided into binaries as a Devi or a Dayan. Similarly, we find that the word diva has also taken up certain, connotations where who is a diva and who is not a diva has acquired layers of, complex emotions within this word. So it has become a very important word in popular culture. However, what are the seeds of resistance against this word diva? And why should we deconstruct it to understand how we as, for instance, me, I was never an activist. However, how we as small scholars, teachers, leaders, academicians, researchers are, entrenching our life with everyday feminism. Is there something happening in India? Are we looking at a little bit of, resistance in small visual acts? We live in a, society full of visual culture. It is saturated with visual acts. So we as women, how do we look at this visual culture, how inclusive this diva, the word diva is, and how we are resisting against the word diva? So why can't I need to go to the next slide.
And we can use the arrow buttons.
Yeah, I'm
to
using the arrow button, but one minute. Yeah. So I generally want to speak about how we as women, or we as, silent activists of our own households are, rising up, or in our small ways resisting against the word diva and becoming narrators of our own stories. So I call it the rise of the Sutradharini, which is the rise of the female narrator. So there is an African proverb which says that until the lioness tells her side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. Women telling their own stories, or having the power to tell their own stories, is the only and the most potent way to legitimize their struggles, which have always existed but never seen the light of the day. So I move on to my next slide, which is from a panel. This comic art is called the sanitary panel, and this entire panel is very interesting to me because it breaks the taboo about the body which was spoken about in the previous session. So it was very important for ma'am to speak how we need to break down certain taboos which we do not generally speak out, or we feel ashamed or embarrassed to speak out in the public. So this comic art you can see on your screen is entitled as Sanitary Panel. And here the story or the small clip speaks about a woman speaking openly about an assault on Twitter. So the woman speaks that there was a sexual assault on her. And the man retorts that if it was anonymous, then it must be fake. And if it was attributed to her name, that means she needs attention. So finally, the story ends that the lady deletes her tweet. So the diva, if we look at the idea of diva, is personified by a woman who is petulant, who is assertive, who is demanding, which of course are not the quality of so-called, quote unquote, ideal femininity. This, presentation or this entire speech, this is situated on the idea of the scholarly or the academic and the patriarchal garb, which is foisted upon the human body, the female body, in order to, give an alternative to the resisting body, which speaks of resistance, which breaks down the taboos and is ready to, say no to things. Therefore, there is a politics of selection and also that of an eraser behind that female body, which is ready to resist. And that body is termed as diva because that body tries to derive a societal power behind her no, behind her assertiveness, and which becomes quote unquote not very social. So this process of divahood is basically manufacturing a mask. It is a mask of femininity and it is a fictional invention. And the woman who lives behind this mask is basically a subjugated reality. Now, if we look at this comic strip and try to read this comic strip, we find seeds of resistance behind this comic strip. Let us see how the author, Miss Kripa, has actually created this comic strip. Why do you see stick diagrams in this comic strip? The stick diagrams take the space of a gender neutral body. The panels, these panels are handmade, and this handmade, the idea of woman working for her own self is a resistance against the mass produced glittery graphic novels or comics, which are generally, the publishing houses are generally by men. So these small resistances are seeds which are slowly, growing, or it's slowly flowering in India. And it is wonderful to see this kind of, bodies, this kind of ideas, this kind of voices of identity and agency coming forth in the present world. Now, let us go to the next slide, where I'm speaking about that this idea of divahood. Now we look at the idea of divas. How many of us have seen this as a very common sight throughout our own villages? Here we find the ladies creating Madhubani art. How many of us would actually attribute divahood to these women? Culture produces this act of creating a diva. Culture produces an act of defining a woman. And this culture is actually controlled by the discourses which we naturalize amongst ourselves. I think we all have read a little bit of Foucault one time or the other, and we know about the docile body of Foucault. The discourse, the ideas which, the society creates and percolates through its various institutions of power, creates this body, which is a weak, docile body, and naturalizes the names which are given to them. So here the women naturalize this act of being homemakers or perhaps painters Remember, when we look at this women as painters, how many of us think that they're really paid for this job? This entire scenario takes me back, to that revolution where women, they made katha. Katha is a sort of a small, uh, what do you say, a small
Embroidery.
cloth which which were children sleep. So there was a time when these women were not paid for it, and now situation is changing. We have a comic book called Sita's Ramayan. We have a comic book called Bhimayana. And these books, the authors are all women. And they have overturned the text, overturned history by getting paid for the task which they were never paid. Or these tasks were considered to be very lowly. So these are the little seeds of resistance which does not get defined by the patriarchal culture. And I'm very glad to be a part of this generation where I see this, these movements coming in. Perhaps these are very small seeds, but these are coming in today's world, and we are all a part of this movement. So I refer to the next slide as Miss Moti. And Miss Moti is another of a very favorite, visual verbal art of mine, where this lady is not aware, or she's not bothered about her weight. It really bothers me when two ladies meet. The first thing they discuss is, have you lost some weight? Or are you on a diet? Are you going to the gym? How important the idea of, being fat or slim has become in today's society. So we all are living under that. Of course, there are health benefits of being lean, but the kind of societal pressure that is exerted on that female body is far more than what is applied to the men, if you think in those terms. However, I do not like to think in binaries as man and woman, and I would like to think in a gender neutral space, that women as ourselves, we are so bothered by our thinness, fatness, or whatever, that we consider this idea of diva to be slim, to be dressed up in a in particular way, have a certain sort of mannerism, and also have that, that kind of an idea which comes with the divahood, as a kind of petulance, a kind of assertiveness. However, this is not women, that women to be bodies to be proud of, because we get defined by that all knowing male gaze. We are thinking of male gaze and defining ourselves. So this uh, comic strip really interests me, as Miss Moti sort of breaks down all these barriers and does her own thing. So I really, when I spoke about women telling their stories, I would love to come back to this place and tell that women who are not very conscious of their bodies alone, but also their minds, also their careers, their financial independence, these are the women who actually, move beyond that sexualized history where women were looked at only as objects, and objects of the scopophilic gaze. Now, how is resistance seeping in visual culture? I would like to give you a minute to read this while I want to play some music for you.
The music is not audible, ma'am.
Not audible? So I give some time for you to look and read at what is written in the slide. We were listening for quite some time. We did need a breather. Now, how is resistance creeping up in the visual culture? First of all, we see that these, like we saw the slide in the sanitary panel, like we saw Miss Moti, we find that these, representations are recursive. They are returning back to the, to the space of their trauma. Miss Moti is returning back and reclaiming her identity in her fat body or in her brownness. The lady in the stick diagram is returning to her site of violence, and they're reclaiming it. They are not erasing it. They are returning back and back and bringing it forth, giving it a voice. We find that these pages are non-linear. They are not very straight, mass-produced, sleek, glitzy productions. They are made by women. They are made by human hands. The lines are broken, similar to our own lines. We have several broken lines in our lives. Mostly they are handwritten, which gives it an authenticity, a sense of truth. The colors are very earthy. The colors are real. You kind of contrast it with, the other visual artwork you see. The colors are very earthy. There is a vagueness and open-endedness to these works. They have visual verbal art in them. So there is the dialogue and there's speech box and then there's a diagram. So there is a sort of vagueness, no, strict end to an answer, because we are deconstructing ourselves in the process. We cannot give solid answers to any questions. We can only try. There is an asymmetry of time, there's asymmetry of place, and asymmetry of projection. There is verbalization of desire, of want, and there is increased use of certain movements, resistance or otherwise, in these artworks. So I'm sure all of us know about the Nirbhaya rape case and the lot of hullabaloo that accompanied this case. But how many of us really know that the entire series of Priya Shakti and also backed by Apne Aap women was made into a huge series, and this was so sleekly produced that we could see Nirbhaya in none of the pages of the book, because it was produced by a publisher who was sitting in the US. So perhaps they're addressing the issues, but how diva-esque are they making the female characters? It is very important as women to understand that we are not all the time the diva the media projects us to be. Now, let us look at how are we, rebuttaling the case. Are we actually, as women narrators or sutradharinis, relating to the institutions of life? How are we, projected as representations in real life? Are we still projected as receptionists in office? Are we still projected as good and the kind teacher in a small school in village? Or are we projected as leaders of institutions or, presidents of countries? Are we? What are these, kind of representations? What are their responses to the market-driven industry, which is always asking for a status quo? So how are these representation or visual verbal art received in the market? So I remember the book, comic book of Marvel, which produced a very, highly publicized Kamala Khan as the brown woman of Pakistan being the Wonder Woman. That was the only USP of the book. How much critically discussed was this book and the actions of Kamala Khan? Was she given a costume which did not project her body as an object? Even if she was wearing a burqa, there are some tests which are called like the Brokeback pose, the Smurfett principle, the sexy lamb test. When you run through these tests, the Bechdel-Wallace test, if you run these representations through these tests, you find that the woman, even with the burqa, even with the veil, was projected in similarly to that of a diva who had assertiveness, was petulant, and had certain characteristics of being deified as a goddess. Do these representations embed, do this representation embed resistance? And how are they, used in this world where we are shifting genres, we are shifting mediums? Are these representations percolating from movies to comics to our games on the computer? Are they getting such access? And is diva, the present diva in the contemporary culture, defining or redefining the framework and the boundaries set by the patriarchy? It is something that we need to ponder upon. Here I have brought about, for an example, a series of books called Mile. And this is a little girl who wanted to study. This entire faculty development program is about education. And I found this series of books very important to this FDP. So this is a little girl who wants to study, who will not be quiet, and is not bothered about other things which her parents want her to do. How many of us have actually seen or read this book? Mile will not be quiet. Mile will speak up. Mile is not a diva. Mile is a simple girl smiling with two braids. Mostly madly Mile. Mile embraces her madness. Mile embraces her own terms. Mile embraces her desire to daydream when her parents coax her to find an educational degree or passing of the school. This book in itself was an eye-opener for me. And looking at this book, I really regretted that why I did not read it when I was a little girl. It does not define how a girl should be. Rather, it defines how should she embrace herself. And I'm happy that these kind of small seeds of resistance is slowly creeping up in today's world. Now, there are a couple of more books that I have discussed here. There is No Place Like Home. This was by Amrapali Basu Matre and Vipin Yadav. It was about the conflict in Bodoland. Shadow Lines by Neha Dikshit, Someday by Samita Gunjal. Someday was very interesting for me to read because it was about a girl who was surrounded by the male gaze, the scopophilic gaze, and then she decides to break open and become like a Munda Malini, or cutting the heads of all and wearing a garland. Nirmala and Nurmala and Kamala Devi. So Kamala Devi, the writer calls her a badass feminist hero, does not call her a diva. First Hand, another book that can be seen in terms of how resistance is creeping up in the visual verbal art, is called First Hand by Arijit Sen and Vidyun Sabhani. And here the story is about Begum Akhtar, where you can see that how the artwork moves from the streets of Faizabad to burqas in the sky. So the best part about this book is about, dreaming about freedom even when you are living in a slum in Faizabad. So Exclusion, this is also by Vidyun Sabhani, and this book is based on oral histories. It is about Chashmadidi, or eyewitnesses and orality. And I think that orality forms a very important part of women's studies, because women, if you look at, in general, not all women have access to tabs, access to mobile phones to record, or perhaps pen and paper. So Chashma Didi is a very important device for us to, remember and make repositories of oral history. So this was an interface of policymakers and graphic artists. And then I come back to the idea that after all these resistances, we also have a book like this, which you can see here. It was based on a famous a book of Banking Chandra Bose, which was called Rani Chaudhurani, Devi Chaudhurani. And this is a visual art of Devi Chaudhurani. And this is how the society sees a woman who was a housemaker, a homemaker, to a wife, to a pirate, to a wife again. So this was the entire story about. So how she left her home in quest of her husband, and then finally she became a homemaker again. She went back to her husband. So that was based on very patriarchal premises. And this has come up as the new improved diva, Rani Chaudhurani, as the diva-esque character that you see on my screen. So are we seeing the rise of another round of such divas? And should we think about it more deeply, how far and how long we need these divas to dictate to our girls, our society, the kind of, the society that we are building on. So this, I will, this was something which I was looking at when I was looking at Devi Chaudhurani and thinking that diva who is a songstress, who is an operatic singer. However, we find these divas all around us. We also find mothers, sisters, friends who sing lullabies but are never given the epithet of divas. And on the other hand, we find women who are speaking or resisting against the female, male gaze, and also the female gaze, where there is a constant comparison. I took this picture from Zuban Publishers, and this was about the poster movement of women of India. And here it says that your words, your eyes, your hands follow us from the home to the street, to the field, to in the office, in the factory, and in the kiln. You call it teasing, we call it harassment. Recognize the difference, stop the violence. So we need to stop comparing ourselves as divas. We need to move beyond the creation of the idea of diva by the culture, and we need to sing our own songs. This will be the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And that's a beautiful ending. Femininity lies in the power to create our own songs. Thank you, ma'am. It was a pleasure to have you and hearing about the women telling their own stories and Sita's Ramayana and people judging the ladies. One of the questions that comes in my mind, and I'm sure that all of our participants also must be having this question, is most of us have come across the term diva from the film industry or the fashion industry, and we relate diva from those places. Do you think the fashion industry has played a major role in depicting or making the image of diva? Or even if we talk about Miss Moti or brown girls and things like that, does the fashion industry or the cinematic industry has an impact on the picture of a lady and a lady not being confident about what she's wearing, how she looks, or what is her complexion? How would you go with it?
Dr. Shalki, thank you. And it is a very interesting question. So as soon as we start attributing things to an industry, we actually start, putting things in boxes. And I do believe, this is a personal interpretation, that things do not exist in boxes. They interface. So it is not only the fashion industry, it is not only the patriarchy. I do not attribute the idea of diva being, attributed to a certain segment of the society. It is the culture as a whole. Of course, there is a rise of this girl. If I'm not sure if you've heard of it, Mad Pixie Idol. That kind of a girl is also the kind of Kareena Kapoor was in that movie where she was constantly missing her train or something of that sort. So the molds are created, the molds are created, and women are sort of, molded in those molds, and then these molds are projected in the society. We as women naturalize it, and we pass it on, and the media takes it up and then embellishes it even further, and then it keeps on adding, and it becomes a loop, and then we in the society naturalize it as a being a diva. So who thinks of Priyanka Chopra as a diva when she was declared the Miss India when I think it was the year 2000? Nobody called her a diva then. How come it has gained so much of a currency now? So women who are resisting need to be put into a binary system, which should not be very, controversial. So diva is a mixed bag. It sits on the, in the fence where it does not sit. It takes a political meaning, where who is a diva, whether it is negative or positive, is for you to understand and guess. So I guess we can attribute to all the industries, we ourselves, the society around us, to this idea of divahood.
Thank you, ma'am. One more question I'd like to ask is, what kind of suggestion would you like to give our young participants, especially the students who are listening to us right now? How can they transform into a diva, or what can be the definition of diva for the new people who are coming up, and because they have got a different definition of a diva, and why can't they become, or they get the confidence of becoming a diva? What are your suggestions?
So, like I told you, it comes from a Latin word, diva, which means a goddess. The participants, those who are in India, I would like to refer to them a Sanskrit shlok from Rig Veda, which is called the Ambreni Shukta. And this is the time when Devi actually, she she came forward, people got to know about her. And it goes like, Aham Rudrebhi Vasubhischarami, Aham Adityai Rutavishwasya Devaya, Aham Indragni Ashvinobha. It's a long shlok, I don't remember all of it. It says that I am the sun. Okay, Aham Rudrebhi Vasubhischarami, I am the wind, I am the power. So the young participants need to know that neither divahood nor devihood is important. The most important thing for a girl or a boy, a man or a woman, is to be themselves. And this idea of divahood is a fake personality which has certain attributes built by the society, embellished by the media, the movie, the fashion sense, and then it has been given a kind of a structure. So we need to deconstruct this idea of divahood and be the real us.
One more concern that I have, I'm sure you must be relating with me right now. There are a lot of girls here. I'm sure they must be in the other parts of the world also, that they don't feel confident unless they get the appreciation from their male counterparts, or they always ask for a special kind of things from the male counterparts, and unless they get that, they are not able to feel confidence confident with themselves. What do you have to tell about this? Because I'm sure that you must be seeing a lot of girls around here also in Uzbekistan, that they really need some special attention from the other parts, and unless they get that, they don't feel confidence in themselves.
Okay, so as long as we stop looking at ourselves from the eyes of the man, as long as we when we start looking at ourselves through our own eyes, we stop looking at appreciation for men. And I also think additionally, this culture of getting likes and loves and on the social media has added a lot to this idea of getting appreciation or being appreciated. So I don't think a girl or a woman who is sure of herself, is aware of what she wants, would really go in for that.
Dr. As you're a very dear colleague, so nothing special to tell you. It was definitely a wonderful presentation. What I would like to say is that deconstructing of Diva, I think the media has to play a greater role in this, because media hype is what contributes to further this Diva image. So because young generation is always hooked to these kind of varieties of social media, and it is there that they post their own pictures and like to get likes and what you said mentioned just now, to be appreciated by the world with all their looks and you're looking great, this that. So media has contributed a lot to further promoting this image of diva. So how do we deconstruct it? It is just we say that love yourself, take pride in what you are, be yourself. But again, till you project yourself, it is the age of optics and what is it? Optics and projections. The more you project, the more attention you get, and it is what this young generation likes in every way. What
Okay,
is your
thank you, Dr. Anita. In your question lies your own answer. When you say that this is the age of media projection, as you say, it is the age of optics, you naturalize this idea of projection. You naturalize that idea of, soaking in the visual culture. And as soon as you do not say this to yourself, you disassociate. So Jacques Derrida, the French philosopher, when he talked about deconstruction, he did not mean, breaking away things. He did not mean scattering things. He actually meant reorganizing things in a new way. He actually meant being complementary to, in addition with, or like he called it a science sponge. So this visuality that we are speaking about is a science sponge. It takes from the context, the social gathering, the social things that we are surrounded with, and it adds to it. So this idea of diva is also a science sponge. It is like a sponge attracting things, and we as human beings are actually naturalizing it. So as soon as you move or break away or understand how this diva is situated on the point of being a binary to these kind of things, then you understand that there is something beyond that diva. I am not calling it good or bad. You can be a diva if you want. It is good to paint your toenails in the office if you feel like it. But if it is that which you really want. So we are living in an image saturated world. You cannot escape visuality. It percolates everywhere. And this idea, which is built up by the fashion industry, the media industry, this is actually provides us with social context, social, science, which the idea of diva is soaking up, like the idea of Devi. it soaks up. A Devi means she has to do this, she has to do that. A Devi is a woman who is always good, but not necessarily that you internalize it. And this is what I think our social activists are doing. This is what our visual artists are doing, that it is okay to be fat. It is okay to have broken lines. It is okay to have emotional trauma, but readdress them.
One of our participants here would like to know your views, ma'am, about construction of the self, because it has always constructed in reference to others putting value to the self.
Now we are moving on from visuality to perhaps a little bit of behavior sciences and construction of the self. Well, self has a lot of layers. You can say identity, role self, ideal self, and if we try to construct, there are multiple selves. And if we are looking at the other and comparing ourselves, then we are always as a lack, like Derrida would call it. There is always a lack. And if we think that as a complementarity to what we have, what is already there to the other, then perhaps we would be in a happier space. So I would rather bypass the lack to be in a much peaceful, happier self when I look at myself and look at the other. So who I would love to know who has asked this. I would perhaps need to know whether.
This is Miss Archana, and she has also commented that because both Diva or Devi is constructed by the society. So that was the reason she was asking you to throw some light on the construction of the self.
Yeah, so it is constructed. This is what I was saying. It is constructed by the society. And if we look at the idea of diva, we also find that there are so many selves which are not divas, like the women who were painting the walls. We never attribute them as divas, but they are the divas. The mothers who sing lullaby, they are also songstresses, but they are not considered divas, but they are divas.
True, ma'am. Professor Vibhuti, if you have anything to say.
Yeah, I think I would like to recite the verses of a song which we all were singing when we encircled Parliament of India in 1980. At the time I was a university student, PhD student, and it was mainly for justice to Mathura, because Mathura was vilified. As you know, the Supreme Court judgment of this 14-year-old tribal girl who was raped by uniformed policemen in the police station in front of all the villagers. In fact, Mahashweta Devi also wrote a short story called Dopadi. I think many of you must have read it also. It inspired so many creative expressions.
Wonderful story.
And Reserve Bank of India's translator Chaya Raje, she generally always wrote in Marathi and English, but we all were so energized that all of us became songwriters also. And what was written, the last stanza of that song, Nari Sharir Pe Atyachar Nahi Sahenge, Hum Manav Hai, Hum Devi Nahi, we are human beings, we are not goddesses. Hum Manav Hai, Hum Dasi Nahi. We are human beings, we are not slaves. Apni manavta ka apman hum nahi sahenge. We will not allow our humanity to be crushed. I think that is the crux of today's lecture, that how we see ourselves. And there is that everyday feminism or everyday contribution, especially the marginalized, invisibilized, non-recognized work of women. I think that needs to be asserted. And I think that will be the achievement. And I think I thoroughly enjoyed today's this thing. It has so much of lyrical beauty along with the very strong content. Thank you, Dr. Supriya Banerjee.
I'm so humbled, ma'am. I'm really humbled.
I would like to thank Professor Vibhuti additionally for joining each and every session and making it more lively. And expect you to be present in all the forthcoming sessions.
I have PhD by bus. Because you know that this is the exam time. So I may drop out for 45 minutes or so.
Yes. So, but your presence is always very more interesting, makes it more interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Dr. Supriya, thank you so much for being with us. It was a wonderful presentation and a very different contemporary topic on deconstruction of the diva and letting us know what a diva is and motivating us to become a diva, whatever our definition of diva is. And it was a wonderful ending by Professor Vibhuti. By narrating the lines of expressing the womanhood. I don't think it could have been a better ending of the day 2 of our international faculty
I
development
think there is
program.
one more diva who has written beautiful verses, Dr. Santosh Kaul. She's a renowned poetess. I think it's there in the chat box. You can recite. Please.
आओ जल्दी I can see by Dr. Santosh Kaul, आओ इतनी जिद करें कि छत और दीवार ही नहीं नींव और जमीन भी हिल जाए, खुले मैदानों में फैल जाएं, अपने आसमान के लिए सुनसान सड़कों पर हवा से बह जाएं. This is wonderful.
Dr. Shalki, may I recite it?
Sure, ma'am, sure.
आओ इतनी जिद करें कि छत और दीवार ही नहीं, नींव और जमीन भी हिल जाए, खुले मैदानों में फैल जाए, अपनी आसमानों के लिए सुनसान सड़कों पर हवाओं से बह जाए.
Translation. There are participants from 10 countries. Dr. Supriya Banerjee. Translation.
Okay. There are a lot of questions. I lost that. 1 minute.
Translation of these verses.
Yes. 1 minute, ma'am.
Yeah.
Just
It's the, yeah.
let us be as stubborn. Let us fight for it. So much so that the roof and the walls break down. Let us break the foundations of the earth. Let us spread across the fields far and wide for our own skies, for our own streets. Let us fly across the winds.
Thanks. Very nice. Wonderful. I would like to thank all our speakers today. Professor Vibhuti, special thanks to you. She's been a very, consistent speaker and impressive listener also of our FDP. So this was the end of the second day of our faculty development program, ladies and gentlemen. Tomorrow we'll be starting the faculty development program at 2:15, and there'll be 2 sessions where Professor Paramita Saha and Dr. Tara Nair will be speaking on accelerating equality and empowerment through gainful empowerment and financial inclusion of women. 15. So I request all the participants to be at time tomorrow, and we've come to the end of the second day of our faculty development program, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. I thank all the participants and our resource persons today. Thank you so much. I request the IT team to please shut the session.